and add some complexity to the way that we look at curtain wall systems, and actually starting to look at how we can deploy them on conceptual masses. We started that a little on Thursday, and we're going to try and reinforce a few concepts today. So I'm just going to start with an architecture template here to get us up and running, and I want to first start off just by showing a couple of additional ways to be thinking about how you employ curtain walls. So I'm going to start off just building an 8-inch typical generic wall, and I'll get a new 3D view in here. And what I wanted to show first was a way in which you can actually use curtain walls as wall or as window perforations in a typical wall condition. So now I'm going to come back down to my curtain wall 1 wall type and hit edit type. There's a little checkbox here that's called automatically embed, which will actually allow you to think about this curtain wall almost as you would a window or a door. So now when I hit OK, I'm also going to change the offset so that this will be embedded as a window frame inside of the generic wall type. So I'm going to make it 12 inches off of the base and 12 feet to the top. Let's make it 13 so that the wall is actually 12 feet. And now when I come in and start drawing, you can see it's already cutting into the existing wall that I've already made here. And now I can select that window type. If I turn on shaded view, you're going to see it's actually cut that curtain wall into the wall face. And then I can go through and do my typical either select the curtain wall and come into edit type and start changing the mullion types all the way across the system, or I could do it with my typical grid, as I might come in and do individually. Sorry, keep hitting OK. I'm just putting the 2.5 by 5 inch mullions across here, and then horizontals with the same. And then I'm going to come over here and, here under the grid in the same edit type, I'm going to change it to fixed distance in both directions, so I get a nice grid across there, and you can see how that cleanly lines up with the exterior wall. I want to go ahead and cut a section through this, so I'm going to go into my first floor plan view, and so that I'm looking at this from above, and I'm going to hit view and section and just cut a little section through here. Now I can come select that section here into the project browser, and you can see here the kind of mullion, the typical mullions that we've been drawing with have just been square profiles. In all honesty, that's completely fine, and you probably will want to use those throughout, at least throughout your integrated project studio for the most part. Once you start drawing wall sections, you're going to want more detail in those systems, and you're going to want to be able to specify certain kinds of mullions or otherwise that you might be using. So far to date, I know a few of you have been trying to adjust and draw the mullions the way you see them on the Center City building, but frankly, most of those mullions are coming in from manufacturers' websites, and we've mentioned this quite a few times, or I've mentioned this and referenced it a few times. So a couple of places to go that you should be aware of. Certainly one is Autodesk Seek. And in here there's 68,000 manufacturers. I'm going to go to FCO, which is a typical, I'm already there, but which is a typical curtain wall manufacturer. And you can see they've got 279 different elements that they've already installed, and you can see the variety of different elements that they have available here, including curtain walls, and they are a major curtain wall manufacturer. And you can see all of the different file types that are available to you: DWGs, DWFs, LCF, skips, SketchUp, PDF, and CSV, which would just be your Excel document of data. And I just want to go ahead and select one of these. You can see this is an RVG. When you see the G, that's indicating it's a Revit group. Basically, when you import it into Revit, it's going to come in as a group, not as a family type. So you'll need to log in to Autodesk Seek or set up an account. You should be able to use your Autodesk account. And I'm just going to download this file and save it locally. Back in Revit now, I'm going to come to the Insert tab and go to, instead of loading as a family, I'm going to, again, it's an RVG file, so I'm going to load it as a group. I need to go to my Downloads folder to find that, and let's see. I need to change the Select option to RVGs, and I'm going to grab this 5600 outside glazed, which was the one I downloaded. It's a 6x12, pretty large mullion system. You can see here these files are typically made for 2009 so that they work in a bunch of different versions of Revit, so that the manufacturers aren't having to upgrade all their files every time Revit gets upgraded, which is basically every other year. And sometimes you'll get errors which are indicating that some of the patterns and things that they've defined as defaults are overwriting, or here the level head circle has been renamed so that those duplicates don't affect the way the system's working. So now when I go and select my curtain wall here and hit edit type, I can come in and go to these mullion designations that are here, where I've just applied a typical 2.5 by 5 inch square mullion. Now you can see that listed here under my mullion options, I've got 6 different types for that FCO window system. One head, one sill, one jamb, which is going to be left, and one jamb, which is going to be right. It's hard to tell from their indications here which one is which. There's no L or R. And then one typical horizontal and one typical vertical. So here first I'm doing the interior type vertical, so I'll select that, and I just need to go down the list and select these. And again, I don't know for the jambs which one's going to be which. I'll just go with the first one for border type 1, and for this with the second one for border type 2. We'll just have to take a look once we get it done. This will be your typical horizontal, and then border type 1 is probably going to be your header. So I'll select the head. Oop. And the sill for the base, and I'll hit OK. Now when I zoom in here on the curtain wall, you can see it's got a little bit more detail. The mullion profile in here has the glazing cut out of it. It actually has a frame that's over the top. If we go into the 3D view of this and zoom in, it's actually facing the other way. You see exactly what we were seeing in section, which is that there is a typical mullion condition coming through that's actually got the cut for the glazing, and it also has this frame over the top of the glazing that's part of the system. So this is a slight increase in the amount of detail. It does look like my curtain wall is actually facing the wrong way. I'm going to select it, hit the space bar, and flip it so that it's facing this way. And I do want to look in section here to see sort of how this is aligning, and you can see it's actually offset slightly from the wall. So I'm going to select the line which represents the curtain grid, or you can see it's the center of the glazing, and I'm just going to change this dimension to 2 inches so that mullion system is sitting flush inside of my wall. So the next part of what I wanted to show, well, I should say that this can get increasingly more complex. So with the FCO system, as we see in the section, you can get you get a certain amount of detail, and you can see actually the header is backwards. So let's go in and fix that. So the header and the sill seem to be oriented backwards to the system. Not sure why that might be. So I'll select the curtain wall, hit edit type. That would be because there's no actual definition here for border type 1. We don't know that that's necessarily the head or the sill. So I'll change that to the sill, and border type 2 to the head, hit OK. Now you can see the glazing is actually nested in there correctly. And we can look in 3D here to see, it does look like we got left and right correct, because that mullion is notched out for the glazing along those edges. Okay, so the FCO, as I was saying, is, you know, one level kind of slightly more complex, but still doesn't have the kind of detail that we saw, say here in the construction documents for Center City, where you can see all of the gaskets, and you can see all of the kind of the detailing in the aluminum extrusion that's allowing for some flexibility within the glazing, as well as the kind of cap that goes over the top of the mullion. So there are, of course, other manufacturers that you can download from. So another one that I'll show you is called Kinnear, an Alcoa company. Alcoa, of course, aluminum manufacturer. These are very popular, used quite a bit in lots of different systems or lots of different buildings. You can see the applications are defined here. I've just brought one up from their products, traditional curtain wall systems. This is the 1600 system, and I'm just downloading a 7.5-inch Revit. So I'll go ahead and hit download. Here again, this is coming in as a Revit template, so not as a group, but as a template. So we'll get that imported and upgraded. And you can see how it went ahead and opened that file up. I'm going to flop back over to my project so that I can update the mullions and check out the Kinnear one. So back in 3D. Again, I can come in and I can select mullion grid, you know, individually, or of course I can select the entire system. Actually, it's important to kind of note there, when I selected this mullion, it's actually grayed out and not allowing me to select those in the way that we have in other instances. That's because the mullion system is applied to the entire curtain wall inside of the curtain wall family. Again, there's kind of 3 layers of definition here. There's the profile for the mullion, which is a family type. There's the mullion itself, which is a family type. And there's a curtain wall system, which is also a family type. And as you go through, depending upon where you define certain components, other options are going to go away. So if you apply the curtain wall, or if you apply a certain mullion type here inside of the curtain wall mullion type, you're not going to be able to actually individually control those definitions. So I'm going to go again to Insert and Load Family and go find that Kinnear file. Downloads, and I think I need to do it as a group again, even though it was an RVT. So let's try this, and there's our system as the RVT, 7.5-inch. I'm going to go through this process again. Again, a few references which are being changed or adapted. Okay, and now going back in, select the entire curtain panel, hit Edit Type, and let's go in and take a look. Now the Kinnear stuff is here. This one does have a designation of jam left and right, head and horizontal. So I'm going to come down and apply the vertical. Let's say that this is left. So I'm going to go to the Kinnear version, left. And this is right. And then scroll down, change out the FCO for the Kinnear. This would be our horizontal. This we now know is our sill. And this is our header. Hit apply or OK. This one doesn't look a whole lot different here in terms of the detailing that we see. Still the same kind of cut. The mullion depth is a little bit deeper. Also has this frame. But when we go into section and we turn on some detail here. So down here under the detail level, if I switch it over to fine, now you're going to see that we're getting the complexity of some of those extrusions that we see in the detail drawings on Center City, where we've got this much more complex kind of extrusion. You can actually see the gasket that's holding the glazing in. and the screw type, which is actually, so this structural piece gets attached gets attached to the glazing first, and then gets screwed through to the front, and then the cap gets snapped on once this screw has been in place. So this little piece gets snapped on. So really what you're seeing here is the ability to kind of clean up the entire thing, mostly through these kinds of small snap connections. I know those details often look quite complex, but really they're just intended to allow you to hide most of the system. Again, you can see up here the header is unique. It's only got one side to it, and the sill, of course, also. So rather than going in and drawing those sorts of extrusions, this is a really great way to actually just get that same kind of detail, especially once you start going in and doing some of your wall sections later on in this semester. Okay, I want to address a couple of other things with curtain walls, in particular the corner conditions. So the other day when we were finishing up, I gave you extra credit for working through the corner condition for Center City. I'm not going to show you, well, I'll show you how to do it on Tuesday once you've submitted your files, but today I do want to show you a little bit just about how those corner conditions work with a typical curtain wall system. So I'm going to grab another one of these curtain wall pieces. You can actually see here the FCO and the Kinnear both came in as new curtain wall types that are listed here under my curtain wall options. Even though I applied the system to a typical curtain wall, they also come in as new types that you could select. So in plan, I want you to go through and just quickly draw a couple of curtain walls that have some corner conditions, so that a couple of different types of corner conditions, so that we can look at how those different conditions can be applied. So I'm gonna, this is the Kinnear system. I'm gonna actually go ahead and kind of select all these, and well, I'm just gonna switch this back over. So I'll select, hit edit type. I'm gonna switch these back over to 2.5, just so we can see the 2.5 by 5, so we can see the typical details much cleaner. And again, don't get too over involved with trying to use these more complex systems. They will weigh your file down really quickly. So be careful, especially with big tower projects like you all are working on. These sorts of things, putting them in too early, can really affect the size of the file and make them much more complex than you really want them to be. Okay, so as we've seen, sometimes the wall conditions actually get joined in a way that we don't necessarily want. So sometimes when we've been trying to move pieces here, for instance, you can see how these two walls are joined. We were having this problem when we were doing the curtain wall in stores. Whenever you're having that problem, this little blue dot can be clicked on, and you can actually say disallow join. So by default, it wants to join two wall systems together, and the way to get that turned off again is to right click on one of the blue dots and hit disallow join, or in this case allow join if I want to put it back onto onto that joint. So now you can see when I drag, now it's once again pulling on the other wall system as I move it around. So what I again wanted to address is this condition where the corners are coming together. And what you see actually, if you go back into edit type under the vertical mullions, this is really where our issue is. If I go to rectangular mullion 2.5 by 5, and I'm sure you've noticed these, there are these corner mullion conditions that are in here. So if I choose, say, a quad corner for the two, and this is really only applicable to the vertical mullions because it's prompting me to delete all of the existing mullions. It actually recognizes this as a corner and puts in the kind of square condition to match. And when I zoom in, you can see how this is a much cleaner, straightforward kind of system. And again, if you're not too concerned with the detail, this is a great way to just quickly get things cleaned up so that it's looking much smoother. If we were to select one of these, hit edit type, and change these over to an L shape, L corner mullion, Same thing, except this time I'm getting more of an L profile, and you can see how it's actually, pushing the glazing, or the position where the glazing system starts off a little bit. So whenever these mullions come in, basically it's a reference to the reference lines in the mullion system itself. And additionally, I should point out that with these mullions, if I go to mullion and select, say, the L corner mullion at 5x5, and I hit edit type, there are options to change the thickness of that and the leg length for each of them going out. So both, it learns to adopt this way and that as you go, but additionally, if I change this leg length to, say, 12 inches for one of the legs, you're going to see it extends and it occludes that curtain panel, right? So it goes ahead and cleans up the curtain panel and moves it out of the way. And again, that's simply because the corner conditions are being referenced. And again, I know a few of you figured out the kind of problem for the corner condition. I don't want to spoil the extra credit for you. So you can sort of assume from some of these that those corner details from Center City that look like this, that have kind of a square cap onto this diagonal, work in a similar fashion. So we'll talk about that a little on Tuesday. Okay, so last thing I want to talk about is these curtain systems as you go to use them, and we started talking about this a bit in Thursday's video, have a lot of limitations. In particular, they don't really like being on curved walls, so we haven't actually tried to do them with a curved wall yet. Let me show you what that looks like. So if I do a start-end arc with a curtain wall system, let's go do it in plan. You can see that what it does is it actually gives you a bunch of straight linear pieces across the face of this curve, and again, it's still using my grid going across. If I were to come in and start placing more elements in the grid, you can see that as I place them, the grid gets cleaner and smoother. But as I zoom in, these are still just straight mullions that are trying to get that curve. And the more mullions I add, the smoother the curve is going to get in this system. But that doesn't really allow us to do much in terms of looking at the conditions, say, along some of your conceptual masses. And so that's what we're going to be working on for the next couple of weeks, is how to really start dealing with the conceptual mass. So under architecture here, you can see there's also this curtain system, which is different than the curtain panel that we've been dealing with so far, which has been a wall type. And it wants to be built in as a wall type, much like any other wall would, and it really is maintained by a grid system. So these curtain systems can actually be applied to conceptual masses. So if I take and quickly make a new conceptual mass, and I want to do it with a kind of spline condition, so that you can see, you can see how these conditions actually work. I'm just going to make a quick facade here that has a spline. So Spline Tool is right there. Has a spline as its edge. Must have missed the snap. There we go. And I'm just going to grab this edge, turn on the X-ray, and I'm just going to kind of pull it so that I get more of a twisted face to this, so you can really get a sense of how the curtain system works. So under architecture, I can go to curtain system, and I can select any part of this conceptual mass. So you can see how it'll allow me to select different faces. I'm just interested in showing you this one here, and I'll hit create system. You can see it thinks for a little bit, and there are, again, limitations with this, but it does allow you to pretty quickly do, much more complex visualizations of what the curtain system might look like. And I can go in here and select it, and you can see it's a little bit different than what we were getting with the curtain panels, but not all that different. And I can come in to each of these and actually define the grid in the same way that I have been. So if I wanted to switch it so it's more of a vertical system, I can do fixed distance 5 by 10 foot here, and again I can come in and define some mullions across the entire system, or I can do them as individual pieces as I have before. So we'll do that. Sorry, my dog is snoring behind me. For whatever reason, he loves being in here while I'm recording. I'll hit OK. And this, of course, takes a little bit more chugging on to put the geometry together. But, and there you can see how this system gets applied across the entire facade. And you don't have a ton of control over these, but it does allow you to at least start visualizing to a certain degree what the curtain wall might look like across the facade. It does still. This is still tied to, and as I started to introduce on Thursday with some of the adaptive components and divided surfaces, and that's what we're going to do again for Thursday. Those give you a lot more flexibility breaking free from the grid. This curtain system still is absolutely reliant on a horizontal or vertical grid with no real options to divert from that. So you still end up with a pretty typical kind of system here. And this, of course, is going to give you some real issues in terms of trying to figure out how to align a floor plate to the grid. So you really would have to break your conceptual mass up into pieces that could allow you to create a linear piece at the at the floor intersections as you worked with it. But it does, in the state that you guys are in terms of massing out your projects, does give you a way to quickly start looking at the way that the curtain system might work across some of your different geometries. All right, that's it for this one. Thanks.